name's Sonia Paulino Love, and I went to Video Uruguay just a year ago. Photographer. Sorry.
My name is Damali Abrams, the Glitter Priestess, and I went to Seoul, South Korea in 2014, and I am an artist and educator, mostly mixed media collage at the moment.
My name is Clare Kambhu, and I went to also Montevideo in Uruguay in 2022. And I am a painter focusing on education spaces and how they shape us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation here. My name is Sofia Grandakowska. Originally, I come from North Macedonia, and I was a New York City apexart resident. In that time, it was resident in 2009, and currently I teach at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
My name is Stephanie Powell. I received a fellowship in 2012 and went to Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and I am an artist and educator.
Thank you. That could be a kind of an interesting split between like Asia and South America going on. It's a great opportunity for all of you to talk about aspects of your fellowship that maybe you enjoyed, you didn't enjoy, and then you get to compare it with people who, besides Claire and Sonia, like went to different locations than you did. So I guess we can start just like your favorite memory or activity. I think this would be extra interesting for people who their fellowship was a long time ago, because then that's something that's stood the test of time. Anyone get started? Just in that little order.
I guess I'll start, although counter to what you just said. Since mine was the first, we're back almost a year ago to the day. I think still for me the most impressive and surprising because it impressed me activity was hanging out with a bunch of senior citizens in the community center, where there were like 50 folks of various ages, anywhere from like, I guess, for a large group, and announced that I was visiting from New York, and I got a huge thanks. Everybody loves New York City.
Did you do something similar, Claire?
I don't know how to a specific sort of like reading. They were enthusiastic about my presence, even though I'm just a random person.
Yeah.
But a lot of like hugging and cheesing it up. It was really, and then I rode the bus back with one where I was staying, and we went to every single photo, and it was really one at first, and then I started getting a little car sick because my screen's like in the car. I was like, yes. I don't remember. I
don't know, I think it kind of
thought was just gonna like hang out with you guys. But yeah, there's like super welcoming and curious vibes.
Before I pick up on something that you started to dive into, I want to Stephanie, Sophia, or Damali get a chance to speak about like their favorite memory or activity from their fellowship.
I was gonna say I did an overnight stay at a Buddhist temple, and that was amazing. It was like we had these, I don't want to say uniforms, but like these like brown kind of free pants and top set, and it was very they were, like we had to wake up at 4 a.m. for mission, and we made mala beads, and there was like a very specific ritual around all of that. But then also I also was scheduled to take these jazzercise classes. They said that in Seoul it's very common that the stay-home moms go to these jazzercise classes in the morning. And it was like a lot of all these like really nice things.
When I first came in New York, it was February 2009, and it was in Balkans. And I felt some to the Twitter to write the diary after that and things like that. But if I'm allowed to extract something from visual memory and my feeling about my first experience in New York, that would be the feeling that I felt like a fish in an aquarium. Why? Because of those big buildings that we are all surrounded, and along with my favorite activity, which was like a fish, and it was a good feeling, like protection, but illness, and that is the feeling that I still have because I moved to New York. I still have the feeling, and walking is to here in this city.
I guess two things. So 2012 was when I went to, and I'll say my experience. I learned a lot about myself that I don't think I would have through artist residencies. But I didn't have internet. I didn't watch Netflix. I actually didn't even think twice about it until people started questioning me about it. I was like, I don't know, he's taken care of, you know? And then I had the internet, kind of like, I couldn't FaceTime, couldn't check in. But I got over it pretty quick, because it was like, 30 days isn't so long in the end. And so that was the big thing that I kind of changed my relationship. Like, it's still to this day, I'm looking at social media for days. It's kind of a long-standing takeaway. It's just like we can easily live without it and learn that anxiety is not really like real. It's just put on you. There's a need for it. And then the other big and some based on the floating villages, and that really kind of put a lot into perspective for me, because the people who live on the floating villages are people who don't have a homeland. They have no papers. They can't work. So a lot of the children, the schools, which I stayed in, they're floating bamboo platforms. So some kids just have third grade, because the only time that will come out is just third grade. So you can be 12 and have been taking third grade curriculum for many years. So that was kind of like, it was hard, but it's also grateful for the experience, because you kind of just don't know until you're literally in like someone else's kind of living situation. Like, you can read about it, you can watch a documentary, but that was something that was really kind of like has resonated with me, especially seeing kind of like multiple generations, very large communities that like are living because of nowhere else kind of live on the water. So those are the two kind of big takeaways that still like resonate with me.
So for some backstory, in 2018, I believe, apexart published like a fellowship book that's like still available to purchase. And I remember when I started at the end of 2023, reading through the book and like getting to your essay, and like you kind of also talk about some similar experiences. I think also it was very helpful for me as the director moving forward to be able to talk to parents after reading kind of your essay. Like what you talk about, it's like at the end of the day, it's 30 days, and most likely the kid will be perfectly okay. I remember there was a moment where you talk about coming home and seeing your child again, and it was fine. Your kid was not traumatized. Yeah, not traumatized. And I think actually for a lot of parents who end up getting a chance to do the fellowship, it's like a chance to be themselves again, the way that, especially in our culture, we kind of make parents, they just become parents. That's a big part of their identity. And in the fellowship, they get to go. Not that it's bad to have kids, obviously. But make it sound.
I didn't tell Stephen that I had a child, I think, until right before that. Because at that, I would like to think things are different now, but at that time, I swear every studio visit I had, and when I was pregnant, the question was about like, so do you think you're going to be able to keep up? I had so much of that for every, so I was like, I'll just wear big dresses. I don't want to talk about this. I'm talking about the work. So I had so much of that I was just like, well, what if I tell them that I'm pregnant, or that I have a kid because we're pregnant, that I have a child, that I'm losing up? Because I felt like whenever anyone found out that I was pregnant or had a little child, I would lose an opportunity. So when I told Stephen, it was just like, even better! This is even better! And I was like, I don't know why, I just had this guard.
I think the experiences you're describing makes perfect sense. That you would be kind of like, well, what if they take away this opportunity to like make some sort of judgment value about me as a parent, and that I can't handle it? But actually, I mean, when I find out that someone's a parent, I'm always just like, I want you to be sure, but we're sure about you. But that doesn't change our decision about you. And I want to go back to something that both Claire and Sonia mentioned, which is like your reception as, like the way you were received by the people that you met, and if any of you have memories of that, like your reception as a foreigner, I don't want to say American, but like as a foreigner in your fellowship location.
I can start again.
We don't have to go down the line, but if you want to do it that way, we can do it that way.
Feel free to volunteer. Just that, do you speak Spanish?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, because I think another challenge for most outgoing fellows is that they're put into a country where they don't speak the language. So my Spanish is not super fluent, and I grew up in the United States speaking Spanglish, and New York City, Spanglish, whatever. So even though I speak Spanish, like this was like real Spanish.
Everywhere
all the time. And then like being recently married to Addison Love. Now my last name is Love, and like walking around town saying I'm Sonia Love, and people are like, oh, that's wonderful. But then like, going to a Spanish-speaking country and introducing myself as Sonia Love, and then getting these quizzical looks. It took me a while to realize you can't pronounce it in Spanish. Like there's no sound in like real Spanish. So I was like, oh, that's fine. I'm an outsider,
Yeah.
And also it's a very homogenous ethnically. So I was like, wow, I'm kind of like the brownest person around, which was also different for me, I don't know, that's all I've done. Not to say I was treated differently necessarily, but I guess maybe understanding how that feels.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess I could just jump we can dance around in the same order. My Spanish isn't great. I mean, I speak Spanish fluidly-ish, but it is a second language, so like not with the fluidity of someone raised in it. But I think the reaction, like most often when traveling as like a tourist, you're there to like engage your own curiosity and take in whatever you're trying to like unlearn or look at. But there in the travel fellowship, it almost felt like I was the curiosity, because I would show up to all these things and people would be like, what?
Why are you here?
What? Like, oh, you're an artist? Like, what is that? And then like, what is this thing that you're doing? And it was like in New York, I don't know that people, I'm curious, people would bat an eye as much to someone doing a weird thing for the sake of their own like life. But there, it's a smaller city, a smaller country, so the idea of going to do a nebulous thing that doesn't have a specific outcome as an artist is like a very strange thing to do. So it felt as I was trying to take in the place, people were trying to take in me in a really like open, various way, but in a way that was like, you are an anomaly. Which I kind of enjoyed, because it's like, oh, you stand isn't judged by curiosity. So
Well, obviously that I came in English-American speaking environment. My native language is from the Slavic group of languages, but I was lucky that I began to study English in my second grade, and after that I continued to develop my knowledge and education in English in my gymnasium, university studies, and so on. So here, when I came with, but personally I was not satisfied, because studying English outside of the original environment is like passive studying, right? So here, when I came, I thought that I don't know how to speak English because I did not have experience in long conversation, everyday conversation in English. And all the time, I would have found myself that I was translating things that I want to say in English in my mind. But I see that I'm still sometimes doing that to present day. Probably it's normal. And but I was well accepted from that aspect, and people asked me, because most of the people did not know anything about Macedonia, about my country, and they said, "But how do you speak so well English, and you come from another language, environment?" So I felt happy to hear those words. And I remember that all the time I was following how people construct the sentences. And when I came back from New York after 1 month, in my country, I began to write in English. I don't know. And some of these texts that I wrote are either at the apexart site, or also I published some texts in one of the publications from apexart. So in general, I had good experience in that. This environment was very encouraging for myself, and to see this opportunity maybe for active exercise of English. Yeah.
That's really lovely. I've noticed if a fellow goes to a location, either to New York or internationally, where it's a second language that they're studying, by the end of it, just be like, I'm starting to think in that language. I'm starting to I feel like I'm really improving, because it is it's intense. A lot of times it's just like there's no one else around you that speaks your native language, and I think sometimes even people will go to. I mean, this is something I guess that would go to Damali and Stephanie. You'll go to a place where you don't know the language at all, unless you do know the language, and I'm totally wrong. And you'll start to pick up parts of vocab because you're there for an entire month. People trying to figure out how to communicate them.
Well, Khmer is the language, and I was supposed to take lessons, but I didn't. Well, the teacher didn't really want to do it. He kept saying "You're not going to learn this," and, And honestly, it was super hard because phonetically it's very different. It's not like in some especially European languages, you can kind of see some crossover and you can kind of figure things out. It's completely unique. And I'm half Japanese and I speak okay Japanese. And there's no sort of even written Chinese kanji and Japanese kanji. You can kind of figure out exit and entrance, because they have meanings.
Yeah.
The written, so I was just kind of at a loss. And there were not English. There are a lot of Australians that come to Southeast Asia. So I did meet a couple Australian friends at some point, and they kind of helped me a little bit. But that was really, traveling was really hard if you can't speak the language, because I just kind of, I got dropped off once at the wrong spot. It was just and then I guess I'll wait for a bus. I don't know what else to do. Hope another one comes by. And that was a bit no, really I wasn't scared though. I don't know why. In retrospect, I should have been terrified. But I wasn't scared. It seemed kind of harm me. There were a lot of mosquitoes. I wasn't going to get gobbled up. So if I had to sleep on the side of the weather.
So for the people that you mentioned, how those interactions feel?
I think everyone has a point person. Yes. My point person, who I'm actually friends with, speak English, but they worked at an organization, so they were kind of really busy. But they went I went to every nightclub in Phnom Penh, every single one. There's maybe so it's easy to all, but they were always I was like, you gotta come with me, And so we did hang out, and they kind of helped me navigate certain certain icons, you need to know this one, and certain words, especially for ordering and stuff. So they kind of helped me just with the really 4-year-old level basics.
And then I don't know if you want to touch on that at all. You don't have to. You can either touch on how you felt you were received in the reception in South Korea, or the language. It could be either or both.
Yeah, I don't speak Korean, so it was really challenging in terms of traveling and getting around. And they told me here, they were like, oh, everybody speaks English there. They definitely don't.
That is not true.
So when I got there with realized after a while is that when I would get lost, because sometimes the signs would go from like being in the Arabic alphabet that we use to being in Korean alphabet, so I would get lost a lot. And at first I would like try to talk to people, and most people didn't speak English. So then what I realized after a while is that if I kind of stood there looking lost, someone who did speak English would come to me and help me. So that was good. I think most of the time people just ignored me. It is also a very like homogeneous place, and so. And then some people would think I was from Southeast Asia because the dark-skinned people who are there. So like one time a couple came up to me and they're like, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "New York." They're like, "New Delhi?" I was like, "New York." They were like, "New Delhi?" And I was like, "America." And they were like, "Oh." And that was often the case. Like they were just not accustomed to dark-skinned people that much. But before I went, I made sure to connect with. Like I asked people to introduce me to people they knew there, because when we had the meeting about the fellowship, I think it was Stephen who said like, we're really interested in cultivating depression in artists. And I was like, it was like isolation and depression. And I was like, I don't think that's what I want. So immediately after he said that, I was like, okay, let me find some people there, because I don't want to be like depressed and isolated. It's like anyone who's been depressed knows it's not something. It's not something aspirational, right? So I was like, my sister had a client who was a young Black woman who had taught in Seoul, and she told me about this Facebook group of Black people in Seoul. So I joined that group, and they had a meetup while I was there, and so I made friends there. And like I had another friend, Shani Peters, who had done this fellowship there, and she introduced me to some Korean friends that she had there. So I did meet people, and I did, and then my birthday was while I was there, and so I also went to nightclubs there. And it was funny because I went with some of the Black women that I met there, and we went to this hip hop club, and we were the only Black people who were there.
Yeah, that sounds like.
And so like when we walked in, the whole club was like, ah! Like so excited, like they had like it was like hip hop has entered the room, And, like so everybody like wanted to dance with us and be around, like they treated us like celebrities. It was really funny. So yeah, that was generally the case, and I learned, as you said, like being there, I picked up a few words. I was able to say like hello, thank you, and I don't eat meat, things like that, like basic things. But yeah, for the most part, it's a very difficult language for me.
You talking about that, I'm assuming it was like over lunch or something before you left, at the departure lunch with Stephen, makes me realize that I think the fellowship has changed so much over the last 25 years. I would say that there is definitely an element of loneliness throughout the fellowship, because you do live alone, but we definitely try and set up like meetings throughout the weeks with different people. We want you to be in different local activities and groups and volunteer stuff, to the point where I think actually instead now, normally when people come back in the end of their fellowship, Stephen will warn them that they might feel depressed because they did so much during their fellowship, and now that they're home, they're going back into their everyday life.
That's
That's really interesting that you said that.
Even after I got back and I told him like I had joined this Facebook group to meet other Black people, he was like, if I had known about that, I would have told you not to join that. So yes, it has changed, I guess.
And I wanted to think about something else you said. I completely lost the second thing that I wanted to say, but that's fine. So you guys are there for 4 weeks, 30 days. It's a long time. I'm curious as to how your opinion of the place that you were staying at changed. I mean, it would be easier probably for people whose fellowship is a little more recent, but still, I think that that's very, just like, I don't know anything, I'm confused, and then by the end of it, like, I don't want to leave. So, and we can start in the opposite order if you want to start instead, so he doesn't have to feel pressure to start again.
My knowledge of in high school, I was a model UN, and my high school was not the best high school, so we always got the undesirable countries. And we had Cambodia for years. We had to represent the Khmer Rouge, which were like, who did like, are the you know, the ones who kind of led the genocide of Cambodia. So it was like, we had to go, like, this is terrible. Like, we had to, so that was my knowledge of Cambodia, was just the Khmer Rouge. And I actually knew, I knew that they were still present. So that was one thing that was really weird to see. Like, you know, you read about things at school, but when you see, like, wow, there's some Khmer Rouge people still in leadership, which is like wild. Like, how come we haven't been, like, there's other people that have been, like, you know, in prison. Like, why are you still in leadership? And seeing, like, the kind of, like, lingering, like, when I first got there, and maybe it was just, like, psychologically, I felt death in the air. Because that genocide to me, because I just was like, I feel like now I'm on this land where this genocide happened, and there's reminders everywhere. Just from, like, people who kind of survived the camps, and I did learn painters who kind of, like, survived in camps because they hadn't paid scenes. And, you know, the ones who had the gentle stroke were the ones who survived. The ones who showed any anger in their brushstroke were killed. It was crazy. So I was kind of like okay to leave in the end, because it's kind of, you know, you have these interesting moments, but then I think that kind of history is still very present, you know, and just because they haven't had enough, you know, help from other countries to kind of help the people who kind of, or the legacy of the genocide, the survivors and their children and offspring.
Very interesting experience.
Yeah. Everyone's just taking a moment to like.
No, because I'm teaching actually genocides, and one of the genocides that my students write about is Cambodian genocide, but I have never heard a personal experience how it be among people who experience. Yeah, so that's why maybe I can continue, but on different topic. For me, what was the most challenging thing when I came to New York? It was to face the loneliness, something that you already mentioned. But I did not experience it as depression, but I experienced it as some kind of teacher, that I have to learn something about it, because on the Balkans, here is your family, grandfathers, grandmothers, cousins, aunts, you're never alone, and many friends. Let's say you go outside on the street and you meet someone and you begin the conversation. Here it was different situation, and at the beginning for me it was very weird that I would have noticed only people with their dogs. People only. They were man or woman with dog, right?
Oh.
Yeah, and for me that was it was like in a movie, right? Because there was no that kind of community. The community was, let's say, if you want to go to apexart at the opening of some exhibition, or to sit at some class among the students. That was kind of community here. So what I learned about that loneliness, because here I really don't have any single relative, ancestor, anyone, and what I learned about it is something that I practiced when I came back to live in New York, and to learn how is to experience the experience of being alone, and what can you do with that? So I find that when I'm in America, I'm more creative than I was there in my country. Yeah. So that would be some part of my experience.
I have noticed while I've been here, I think in the year and change that I've been here, I've worked with at least 10 fellows. I facilitate their actual fellowships, not stuff like, I've met many more fellows beyond that. And a lot of the fellows who come to New York, they're just like, I was really scared to be alone because I've never been alone for this long at any point in my life, basically. And actually, at the end of 30 days, like I do see a lot of value in being alone. I think there was even a fellow who she was just like, as a kid, I was with my parents, and then I got married, and then we had kids, and now my kids are starting to have kids, and I'm just always like with a giant group of family, like no matter what. And so, like basically, for the first time in her life, in this fellowship was a chance for her to just be by herself, meet new people without any sort of expectations of like the way that she might behave or things like that, because like her family has known her entire life, and she really enjoyed it. So I think that's definitely a result that can happen. Not that everyone has it.
It is a very interesting process because through that process you learn more about yourself and you learn how to acknowledge not only your talents but the appreciation for things that you want to do, but you have to do it by yourself. There is no mother, father, grandfather to do this. You have to go to yourself all the time, and it's very deep experience.
I don't know if you felt this way, but I didn't feel alone at all because everyone that I met was like, hey, let's meet up again tomorrow. I'm so sorry, I have like 5 things to do tomorrow on my agenda. So I just felt like I was constantly being invited into people's lives in a really nice way. And it didn't feel lonely. Yeah, it felt like I always had the opportunity to hang out with someone if I wanted, if I could. And I almost wished that I had fewer things to do so that I could have met the people I met more than once. Like it was like, hi, really deep experience, bye forever. Like I'm not gonna see you again. And I don't know that I can't remember how my experience of Monte Video changed from beginning to end, but I felt like it reframed how I thought of New York. In that, actually, yeah, no. When I first got there, everything's new. So it feels like a bigger place. And then over time, as I get to know the city and like how to move around and stuff, I realized how much smaller it is than New York. And New York felt like it feels routine, day to day in your life, but then it felt like a lot more vibrant when I got back. Because I realized that it's a big city, like it's a bigger city than not every city, but cities. And Montevideo started to feel like a small compared to here because it felt less ominous and just like, yeah, easy to navigate and stuff.
So when I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew like North Korea, South Korea, but I didn't know specifically anything about. And the city was amazing. It was like light years ahead of New York. Super high tech, super high fashion, so much to see. And we weren't allowed to see any art or make any art while we were there. That was the only thing that was, I think that was the most challenging thing besides being alone all the time. And not speaking the language or understanding anything anyone was saying. But then also, there was something peaceful about like being able to be on the subway and not knowing what anyone's saying. It's like just background noise, when being able to be spaces, restaurants, and people are talking, but it's like I'm just alone with my thoughts because I don't know what anyone's saying any other time. So that was nice. And I got really comfortable with the subway system over time. Everything was really clean. Like they shut the subway down at 11 p.m. and they scrub everything. Like I guess what was happening here during COVID, that's just their regular practice. So everything was spotless everywhere, and it's a really amazing. I really love to go. I haven't gotten a chance yet, but I loved it. So I think over time I did get more comfortable being there.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with pretty much everything you said. And it's a little strange for me because when I was told I was going to Montevideo, I was like, where is that? Yeah, I thought it was far north anyway. You know, kind of just land there, figure it out. Thankfully, our hosts are very gracious and accommodating. So, as far as the loneliness factor, I agree that I never really felt, I was alone a lot, but never really felt lonely. My circumstances were a little thrown askew because I got to like a car accident pretty much the first week I was there, so it kind of like.
You cannot bring that up and then not go more into depth about it. Everyone's eyes like just got huge.
I was crossing the street. Yeah, I was hit. I like flew, but nothing broke. You know, it was like a good scene, and then it was like I gotta get to therapy. Let's just leave it alone. You know, whatever. I was on the way to the therapist. You guys didn't do that. The earlier groups. No. We now have to go to a therapist once a week.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. But I was like under a lot of pressure. I was like walking really fast to get there. But anyway, that kind of like messed with my head.
Yeah.
So I'm like trying to like compartmentalize all these feelings and then like of being there. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? What is my purpose here? Why did this happen? How do I feel? I have to go out and like spend the whole day walking around, so I have to be okay. Because I was like, I'm not gonna, well, anyway. It was difficult, but not for the prescribed reasons. And then I healed, and Mia, thank you, also, I was like, I'm just really tired. It was very hot this summer, like dry, like 90, I checked the weather the other day, and it's 90 degrees there, so it is legitimately hot, and we're out all day in the sun, and I'm like all bruised up, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm just tired. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh yeah. Like I didn't really want to acknowledge the fact that this happened.
It was very interesting because it happened outside of office hours, I think on the weekend, and I had made it very clear to both you and your point people to contact me if anything serious had happened via my phone. They didn't, so I came to work and I had maybe 10 emails about how you had been hit by a car, and I mean, it was like, why wouldn't they tell me? Like, I don't know. I was like, I want to make her okay, and we ended up accommodating because like, no, I'm fine. Like, you are not fine, and so we're gonna make sure that your schedule is a little bit less intense, so you can actually like heal and like enjoy your time there. But it wasn't extremely serious, like you said. You didn't have to go to a doctor. It was more. But I do think you were a little bit more bruised up than you wanted to talk about when first
I
happened.
know, looking back, of course, now it's like I want to power because I gotta do this thing, But it was fine. We're there at the very start of the trip, so it's like another 4 weeks to go. But it definitely like made it harder. So like by week 3, I'm like, I want to go home. But then like week 4 comes around, and I'm like, now we're talking about like, would you like to move there? I don't know. But one thing I did take away, I guess to answer your question, I didn't have any notion of what I was going to. I barely knew where it was, so I didn't have any preconceptions to compare before and after. But there were a lot of things I learned there that I brought back with like resentment for our culture, certain things about our culture where many people told me they don't even have armed guards at the residential office. It's not a house, it's like an office building. There are no armed guards. Nobody's checking. I get here, we're like going to MoMA and they like check your bag, go through like a detector, all this crazy stuff.
We have a lot of meetings here and gone upstairs.
Yes. I learned a lot of stuff there at the beginning. it's also, it's a smaller society, maybe that's helpful. They do have high taxes, but like the money goes back into the culture where if you want to go to college, it's free. Throughout the whole country, you know, and like, you wouldn't even call it being liberal because it's just the way people, they're not like all this stuff. It's almost, there are religions all consumed. Just like the contrasts. And then also refer to it as like a third world. I really see that. You know, you have running water, the electricity works. You know, I don't know. That was strange.
I remember during your actual fellowship, you mentioned that it was more like laid back overall. Like in your first week, the first 2 weeks, I think you asked me a couple of times, like, am I doing enough things? And I look at your calendar, like, you're doing the amount of things fellows do, but I think it just has been busy.
Yeah,
Everyone's kind of running around. So I think that's actually something that a lot of international fellows face. They get their first week, they're like, I feel like I should be doing more activities. Like, well, if you do more activities, you won't have time to eat or sleep. So I think your schedule is fine, but I think the actual environment that you're in is different than one that you're used to. I also wanted to ask, I don't know if I'm correct if I'm wrong, but did you get COVID while you were there, Claire?
Yeah, I got COVID. So my trip was sort of shortened by a week in a way because I was just inside for a week. But it was sort of the same as having COVID anyway. Like I had COVID twice before that year, and I could be, I just slept and watched Netflix and ate. Like I did the same things that I would do here because I just ordered food, like literally the same as having COVID anywhere because you're isolated. So I did feel like the trip was shorter, but it wasn't any different to have COVID there than it would have been to have COVID here.
Just want to make sure I didn't miss out on anyone for the last question I asked, right? Everyone got a chance to speak. I don't want to like bulldoze over you guys. I'm curious because you end up doing probably like close to 70 activities over the 4 weeks. Some of them are repeated, but a lot of them are like one-off things because it's basically the schedule is 2 to 4 activities, 6 days a week with 1 day off. I know that might be different for some of the earlier fellows, but that's definitely what it's been like since 2023, which is when I started. So I wanted to ask if there's anything that you discovered during your fellowship that you still do, like any sort of activity that you experienced for the first time in your fellowship location that's still part of your life.
There's stuff I would like to do, but like dance classes, boxing, like all the classes, the different types of activities. I would love to do that, but not in my day to day. But I wouldn't be able to do anything else. Yeah, but I really enjoyed all the activities.
I feel like a lot of my activities were kind of academic. Also, since I didn't have internet, I was introduced to this audio-visual center, so I just watched kind of documentaries all the time, which was, kind of bringing me down.
Yeah.
But,
some of course you were like, get me out of here.
It did kind of lead me because there was this painter named Van Dyck who I kind of was introduced to. He was one of the painters that survived because he had a gentle stroke, which is just wild to me. He's like, I wasn't even the better painter. He's like, I just painted very patiently, and that showed that he didn't express anger. But I watched a documentary on him, and then I was determined to find where his paintings were because he was in Documenta, so he was kind of, he was seen, outside of Cambodia and considered historically relevant. And I found his paintings. The museum was in a restaurant, and they were just wrapped in saran wrap. They're the paintings. So it's not like they were, it made me think like how how he's well documented. I mean, you could Google him. He's kind of a significant artist. Documented, did a whole thing on him after he passed away. And then to see the work just like hanging on the wall, wrapped in saran wrap for protection, it's like, wow, it's just like, here art art is so commodified that it would be so precious, right? You would, if something had historical relevance, it's just, the family found it relative. So they wrapped it and did what they could, wrapped it in saran wrap. And so I think about like things like that. I kind of think about every now and then. I think the only thing that I kind of like activity that I would like to do again is I had to have my hair washed at a salon, and I did, which you could have done at a salon, and you could have it done at a market just on the curb. Someone will just walk here. So I did the whole gamut. I did like the 50-cent hair wash, the hair wash, where I had my hair washed and my nails done at the same time. So I was really just like this, and it was the most bizarre. Like, this is like, I feel so powerless. There's someone on every part of me, and I can't move. I would do that again. If I could. I haven't seen it anywhere.
That's like an $1,000 experience.
Yeah.
That would be really extremely luxurious.
But I was like, that was kind of weird, and feeling like powerless to like vanity or something. Like you're all in control. If I move, I'm gonna mess it up.
Yeah, so for a second I was like, what was the question that I asked? Because that was such an interesting anecdote. But about any sort of activities that you have carried with you past your fellowship dates.
I can't say, well, I wouldn't say like any of the activities, like I didn't have a whole lot of things to do because it was summertime and carnival season, a lot of people leave. I did like a singing class, which was awkward. I don't know if I'd do it again, but maybe. But I think what I've taken, some stuff that we had to do was write this journal entry, like every day, every other day. And for me, it's just like agony. I've been told I'm a good writer, but I kind of hate it. So I was like, the only way I'm gonna get through this is to just write, like don't be so concerned about your words and things like that. So I think that's been very helpful. Now when I have to write, I'm like, just do it, forget about it.
Did you all keep a journal? I think it started after, like before all of your fellowships. Right?
I kept the journal.
Yeah.
We had to write the blog, or that's
Yeah.
Okay.
I was supposed to, but I didn't have internet.
Yeah, you couldn't.
Good excuse.
Sorry, I can't do that.
I did a couple of entries, and then I was like waiting in line at like internet cafes.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like you just couldn't get in sometimes. Like I'm on, like I'm waiting for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of like gave up on that.
So I also want to give a few minutes for any audience questions or to the panelists about their location and their experiences, but also if you have any questions about the fellowship, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, I guess I have a couple of questions. Firstly, is it like a sort of residency where you don't actually make work, but you go to the place and you're just sort of submerged in culture?
Yeah, so it's a non-production oriented fellowship. We actually ask people to not make art. Obviously we're not spying on it.
Yeah.
So we can't know. But we ask that, and we ask them to stay away from museums and galleries as well throughout their fellowship. Now we have one day at the end, like the second to last or the last day before they leave, where we normally have like a museum day, so they get to go to a couple of like museums or galleries, and then they can compare how they feel about that art and that experience after having not interacted with art throughout the month. And we also don't ask for any pieces from the artist, which I understand is very different from other residencies, which pretty much require pieces from the artists that they work with.
And just one therapy while is that part of the regimen that you have to go to therapy while that?
So both the New York City and the International Fellows have therapy once a week that ends up being 4 sessions throughout their fellowship. Yeah. In New York, it's the same therapist that we always work with, but obviously for international fellows, it depends on where they are.
Can I ask what kind of proposals or candidates are attracted to you to include?
So, interestingly, our fellowship is a nomination-only based sort of like application situation. So we don't, the fellows don't just apply. There isn't like a link on our website for just anyone to apply. Instead, the entire staff is looking for people domestically and globally within the art and culture sector to reach out to and ask them to nominate an artist that they think would most benefit from the fellowship after we describe what the fellowship is like to them. Submit to us. And if the person, seems like they're in a good place, and by that we just mean like they're able to do fellowship, like go all in. And we'll normally reach out to that person and ask them to fill out an application. And I'll sit down and talk with them over coffee or over Zoom, see how they are. If they're able to do it, is honestly the biggest question that we have, because we don't judge their work or their career. Like, we're mostly just interested in, like, can you really commit to the no art? The no art thing is a big thing. Like, can you commit to that? Can you leaving your friends and family potentially for a month? Are you okay with relinquishing your time because they don't choose the calendar that they receive? The schedule is made by the staff members. So if someone was just like, I'm not comfortable with you guys telling me what activities to do every day, then we would be like, unfortunately, like, you seem like the right person, but like, you really would not be able to do this fellowship. And so for international fellows, the other step would be that we ask for a travel list. Again, I don't know if this is true for before 2023, but we ask them for a complete travel list because we want the fellows to be going to a place they've never been to before.
This reminds me of another good one about what we may have brought back is the concept of not saying no, like throwing yourself into uncomfortable situations, which has me on this panel right now.
I was just wondering if anybody ever had a negative experience where, like, the community did not appreciate someone from America or whatever being visiting their country.
I didn't really experience anything negative. I would say I didn't always feel welcomed in certain areas. I mean, I think Americans, it's not talked so much about here, but during the Vietnam War, the U.S. did have Kambhu. It's not really talked about much, but I'm reminded, of that history. And I believe the U.S. shot was Agent Abrams. So seeing chemical burn people. So that's kind of like a history reminder. Like in Vietnam, it's not called the Vietnam War; it's called the American War. So those kind of reminders, are, you just kind of like, you have to like swallow, like, I know that's where I'm from. But for the most part, I felt like I didn't really necessarily feel overly judged. I just felt like looked at, like, what are you doing here? Because there's not many foreigners that I possibly know. Everywhere I travel, it's touristy. But I felt like I kind of versus like being curious and engaging. I just was kind of like knowing about it.
I definitely, that is a question that has come up with fellows before they leave. They ask me like, well, what do I do if I like experience xenophobia or racism? And I always let them know that we can't control obviously people and other how they react in that location, but I always make clear that I hold space for anything like that over their meetings. So because I meet with all of the New York City fellows in person once a week, but I meet with the international fellows once a week via Zoom, so that they can just let me know about anything like that. And I think the most that people have talked about to me so far has been kind of like this. It's a curiosity, but there's also a level of ignorance. So we have fellows, Filipino based in America, who went to the country Eastern Europe. And people would ask, like, "Oh, are you Chinese? Like, where in China are you from?" He's like, "I'm not. I'm from somewhere else." But they were not attempting to be disrespectful. They just like genuinely didn't know. So then he got to have a conversation with them. We're just open to audience questions if you ever had any questions for the apexart fellows or about the fellowship. No, I can ask you guys a little bit about your pieces in the show, and if you feel like they relate to your time in your fellowship.
My piece is the embroidery. It's real light. And it is not connected directly with my residency in New York, but it is connected with the experience that I gained, and I talked a little bit about that, to be more creative and to do things in time that you did not have maybe time to do them before. Yeah, it's not about feeling alone, but it's creation, the production of something.
Well,
I was gonna say, I like hearing about your piece.
Oh, mine doesn't really relate to anything from the residency. I think my art practice has been kind of consistent. My one is the one with the body holding the photo. I mean, a lot of my work kind of talks about the Asian American kind of experience, and kind of thinking about like perception and I guess if I were to kind of pull something from my experience in Cambodia with kind of like Asian female identity, I will say the one thing, and it's something I noticed that even people living like women living on the floating villages, which really have no money, like there's no source of income. You're really living off what you catch, and if you're home with a bag of rice or rice from, you know, some nonprofit organization, that's kind of what you have. I really like, there were some women that really, they were so beautiful, and they did their hair every morning with curlers, makeup, yet like no shoes, with feet that maybe look like they've never had shoes. Like very kind of like hard, they've had hard lives, and but there is this like level of beauty and women taking care of each other and doing each other's hair that I thought was really beautiful. And I think that like in Asian cultures in general, there is this kind of women helping women getting dressed, women helping women doing their makeup and kind of adorning themselves. That's kind of like a universal Asian kind of relationship to beauty.
My piece is that one with its painted text. It's a detail of a larger painting. I started that painting pretty soon after I got back from the fellowship, and this is a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I'd been teaching in the DOE public schools for 8-ish years before the fellowship or something like that. No, yeah. Anyway, and so I've always had an art practice that's like that's balanced with teaching and education. And one of the things that I talked a lot about during this therapy, like the experience of being in Montevideo wasn't super duper challenging. One, because I blended in visually with the people there and spoke the language, so like they didn't even know I was American. They wouldn't necessarily know unless I told them. So in therapy, I just mostly talked about being an artist and the difficulties that I have around that. And being an artist, this is just like a me thing, this is not a judgment on other people, but it can feel like being an artist is a selfish act. And, it's like, I'm making a painting, and like, here, you have to look at it, look at this. It just always sort of felt like, selfish. And so that's like the main thing I talked about in therapy. And the therapist was like, who was a therapist and also a fiction writer, so also had like a dual career, was like, would you be like angry at an author for a book you liked? Like, would you think they're selfish? And I'm like, no. So it was very helpful for me to just process being an artist. I had never been in there before. So during the fellowship, I decided to leave the DOE. It was looking at a tenured position in public school, so it felt super stable, but it was always a challenge to make art and to show it. And I applied to an art residency before the fellowship and found out that I got it during the fellowship, and then was trying to weigh like, well, stability versus being an artist and all of that. And I decided to leave the DOE during the fellowship, and then started that painting of my UFT card soon after the fellowship.
Mine is the diptych of this guy jumping into the Samate in Dominican Republic. I picked that from my archive for this show specifically because it's kind of like jumping into an abyss, and then the title ended up being like pretty literal, like into the unknown. And so that's pretty much it. It kind of, I wouldn't say it's that precarious. Not for myself. I was like, yeah, let's do it. But I think the spirit of the fellowship, the intention of the experience is kind of there.
My piece is around the corner when you first come in through the door. Nia was kind enough to add my piece to the exhibit after the exhibit was already up because I totally missed the call. And when I came to the opening, Nia generously offered me to add my work to the show. And my piece is a world peace vision board that I made in 2016. So not directly connected either, but this connecting people around the world. And a vision board is typically something that people make for people who are not familiar with vision boards. Has anyone ever heard of a vision board or made a vision board? Okay, so, but generally speaking, the idea of a vision board is that you would take images of things that you want to manifest in your life or goals that you have, and you would put the images there so that you're consciously visualizing the things that you want to create in your life. And so the vision board I made is called World Peace Vision Board, and I took a map of the world and wrote words and ideas about peace and love all over the map. And it's an idea about us collectively visualizing peace around the world. And then there's also from Democracy Now, Juan Gonzalez and Amy Good. He's not there anymore, but at the time he was. There's a picture of them declaring world peace on the news. So it's this idea of like, we can get there. We can technically create any world that we want to live in. I'm super disappointed in our nation for continuing with this nonsense, but here we are. So, but anyway, so the idea is that we're visualizing world peace.
Thank you, all of you. Any final questions from our audience members?
I had one more. You were saying or made me think, both of you made me think of another thing, which is just contrasting teaching and being a fellow and an artist in relation to being an artist in the world and the role of the artist. Like and why I felt like making art is a selfish act, even though I know it's not entirely. Part of being the fellow is you not deciding what you're going to do on a daily basis and someone else, not giving you an itinerary and not having any choice. And talking about being a parent, artist, and fellow, maybe similar to being a teacher in that you're always like deciding that someone else is going to do. So being the recipient of someone else's plan is like so lovely because I love doing stuff. Planning stuff is a lot of work. And just being the recipient of someone else's plan felt like I was really taken care of in a way. And it helped me get through this idea that making art is a selfish act because I'm starting to see that the artist's role is more like the child's role in that, we take in the world and process it however we do. And that's not necessarily like for the goal of like being seen, but for the goal of like being just like an open human, like how a child is in the world, like open, connected, and looking at the art we make not as this is important and historically relevant, but as just like a human act that hopefully can create something better. So just that the contrast between being someone making plans and someone receiving plans, and the artist as someone who takes things in was
how a lot of fellowship is about putting artists in this sort of like active role, like getting you guys to go back into your childhood curiosity because they all. And I plan to do so. Thanks all of you. If you have any questions or suggestions for me.
You mean you as the planner at apexart programming?
Yeah.
Well, we're broad. Ideas of your nightlives when you were out there, because I was at home tired watching Richardson, and like dinner to be there starts at 9, and I'm never gonna make it. Like I'm in bed. But and then realizing later, maybe midway through, or I just remembering, I guess is something I already knew about tango culture there, although I guess I associated more with Argentina, but it's big there. There's like this whole other world going on that I didn't motivate myself enough to go explore personally. So I think that if it was managed on the calendar, I'd be like in it, So maybe more, and then also you're saying about at dawn, because my activities are like, during regular 9 to 5, so maybe like expand boundaries.
Yeah.
You can just go back and look at my itinerary and redo it. It's super, I had nightlife planned, hair wash, nails done, specific restaurants to go to. It's also Phnom Penh, so it's so small. You could, some of the things on the activity, I was like, why did you send me here? It's a bookstore. But it was a significant bookstore, but I couldn't read any of the books. But, it was significant to the town. But I think the nightlife part was great. I really got into the nightlife. And I just was amazed, how for me, it's everyone wants to go out, everyone in the world. Nightlife is everywhere. So cool, we went to. And for me also, I wasn't with my kid. So I'm we're going to every single club, and when the Lino, who was my contact, was like, oh, there's these, it's a Nigerian club that just opened. A Nigerian club in Kambhu? Let's go! I went to every single option, and it was super cool. It was super fun, and such a contrast to the daily life. I did feel you know, nightlife is a kind of is escapism in a lot of ways, and it did feel like, you know, the kind of false luxuries that nightlife kind of like sets up. I just thought it was kind of a really interesting kind of like day to night contrast.
I guess I just have one quick question. Like, does the artist pay for the residency or is it funded?
So the accommodation, flight, and programming, and also domestic travel is all covered by apexart. But personal, like toiletries or food costs are taken care of by the artist.
Cool. Sounds nice.
And I just wanted to say one thing about that. Like, it was my birthday. That was mine wasn't on my itinerary, but then it was funny because once we were out and we went to the club, then they were like, "Oh, by the way, the subway closes at 11, so we have to stay out until 6 a.m. when the subway opens."
Oh my gosh.
And so, like, at one point, I'm also like not anymore a late night person, so like at one point I'm like in the corner sleeping at the club. It was fun.
Yeah. But yeah, anyone else questions, comments from the panels? I mean, also from the audience, but from the panels. I want to give you guys a chance to ask the questions instead of just answering them.
How do you think? Well, you have outgoing fellows now.
We don't have one currently, but we do have one soon. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how, in relation to Brandon's question about how people might be received in a different country, like especially now since things are so heated here, everybody's got an opinion about Americans, and they're probably not very good right now.
So we recently had someone go to Athens, who is ethnically half white, half Chinese. And she mentioned that people actually not immediately read her as American because apparently a lot of the Asian population in Athens are like domestic workers from the Asian continent as opposed to like Asian American tourists. She did speak to people about and things like that. People were pretty understanding of differentiating between American citizens and their government, but they did. So I think that's kind of where places like I mean, that was even the point that I did it in 2019, and I were just like, oh, you're in
Yeah.
But I do, there definitely is, and also in here, red is plenty of space outside of America because the whole idea of what America's like. And also, there are many different ways to be American. Thank you, all of you. Thank all of you for coming.